B1 family, welcome to BlackLogic. So today we're going to talk about how redlining as well as predatory lending practices throughout the housing market has been one of the most singular factors of the reason that most Black Americans live in poverty. Now, some may not take this as fact. Is this a matter of truth? And when we look at these things and we dive into the details, what we soon find out is that these things were targeted. These things didn't come about by the way of the economy. Now, during those times, the excuses was the Great Depression of 1929, or even coming out of World War II in the 40s. So when we look at these things, the one period of time where alleviating is in the 1930s. Now, we do understand during the 1930s, certain organizations were built, but it was a mass push to put Americans into houses. So I'm trying to get to a particular point where we have to make relevance to all this information out there and conjoin it and combine it to make it make sense to describe one of the factors of the reason why we're in the economic depression that Black Americans are in. So again, we have to essentially rewind to aftermath of the Great Depression when the Homeowners Loan Corporation, as well as the Federal Housing Administration, they emerged as one of those organizations by the federal government that really tried to help so-called struggling Americans. And there were certain initiatives that were tainted by discriminatory practices, and this was majority of Black folk. But it was exemplified by the infamous redlining and how the HOLC created these redlining maps to map out what they labeled as hazardous areas. And these so-called hazardous areas were majority Black, were predominantly Black. And in those areas, after diving out the research, what they started to find out is that Black Americans was denied access to loans, hindering home ownership and their potential to wealth build. See, these are one of those factors that we never go over. We just kind of chit chat and talk because there's a lot of us who are, well, I won't say a lot. There is a good percentage or a percentage that most people may not know that we have of Black Americans doing a great, doing pretty good, middle class to high class, and even to the point where we're rich. So when we have these examples, it may not seem like the vast of Black Americans are not living in that conditions, even though some of us even came from these communities and we worked hard, we figured out a way to navigate, and we became successful by some means. So this may be difficult for some people to understand, and I get it. And I applaud. I applaud it in a lot of sense because this helps me to get into a creative space for other people to understand it essentially the way I understand it. So when we look at this, these are some of the tales and information that may help people to get it better just as we work through this. Fair use, fair use.
Baltimore's inner harbor is postcard perfect. After all, it is one of the city's most photographed areas and home to its most popular tourist attractions. But the picture begins to fade only 6 miles away, here on Shirley Avenue.
You have more empty houses here than you have people living in.
Patrick Penn owns a home here, but he's watched a growing number of his neighbors lose theirs to foreclosure.
Now, just for some context, this is an old video, okay? I'm bringing you back from the 1929s, from the Great Depression, to 1933, where the Homeowners Loan Corporation, as well as the next year, the FHA got into the mix of the housing, and how things started to terminally go worse for Black people, even more so they was already been discriminatory and putting this in certain areas, but redlining just was not about allowing Black Americans to move out of their neighborhoods into other mixed and or white communities. it was also the degradation and the devaluing of their homes. That is the important part here.
And each empty house adds new trouble to an already troubled neighborhood.
The people move out their homes and drug dealers take over empty homes. I mean, it's obvious.
It isn't just Shirley Avenue. Foreclosure snapshots are about the same here on Clinton Avenue and here on Arnold Court. They're all predominantly African-American neighborhoods, and city leaders say it's not a coincidence, but an ugly consequence of racism. Baltimore blames mortgage giant Wells Fargo and is suing the bank, alleging it targeted those neighborhoods for abusive subprime lending practices. In the lawsuit, 2 former company employees admit there were financial incentives to encourage employees to target African-American neighborhoods.
Actual and tangible proof. This is the important part. When you don't only bring resources, you bring those invoices and say, well, this is the information that we have to explain to the rest of all these so-called other model minority communities. And not to be divisive, but a lot of immigrants come to this country and they're trying to understand, I can come over here and I have, instant to credit. I have instant to getting a loan and building my business, where you guys are not even immigrants. You guys have been here before the British essentially gave independence to America. Because you guys was here, what, 1619? That's the year they're most formally know, but we know it was in the 1500s when the first slaves came here by the way of some Spanish explorers, some conquistadors. But nonetheless, family, what's important here is that these immigrants can come over here and have access to the banks that we actually deposit and do business with our money. And they're extracting the wealth even off our dollars there, but not giving people high interest loan. But that's another topic for another day. But these points are never made because when these groups come over here, they don't know our history. But family, we should know our history. And if they have an ear to listen, I believe that we should tell them, but let us not contradict and forego our own history and to speak the truth as we know it to be.
For deceptive, high-priced loans that resulted in unnecessary foreclosures, even if they qualified for a standard loan. CBN News spoke with the city's lead attorney, George Nilsson, about the case.
The city's goal is twofold. One is to make sure that the practices that are alleged in the complaint are not continuing and do not continue, but also to recover damages to the city caused by the Wells Fargo behaviors and foreclosures.
Wells Fargo wants the lawsuit dismissed, but so far a judge has denied that motion. The bank would not consent to an interview, but in a written statement, the company told CBN News, "We welcome the opportunity to set the record straight and demonstrate the many controls we have in place to ensure fair, responsible, and non-discriminatory lending for all our customers." Baltimore's lawsuit against Wells Fargo names 163 of the bank's vacant and foreclosed homes in the city. Here's a look at the list. Each address is in a predominantly black neighborhood, and the lawsuit says the bank didn't only target black neighborhoods, it also targeted black churches.
So it goes across the board, family. Not only black neighborhoods and black homes, but black churches as well. And it stated, even in the evidence, that these are the neighborhoods they were targeting. So this practice actually started back in the early 1930s. Things didn't really tremendously increase for the conditions, quote unquote, until the 1970s. But even to this day, we still have proof and evidence that the so-called redlining just transformed into gentrification because they're still targeting black communities. Now, there's a few of, black people that's doing financially well. And because they are they have the opportunity to move into a white neighborhood, they may not see it the same way that other people who don't have those same opportunities see it. Oakland, California It says here from 1933 to 36, the Homeowners Loan Corporation refinanced more than $3 billion in mortgages, equivalent to roughly $1 trillion as a share of the economy today. The HOLC pioneered the self-amortizing mortgage, allowing families to own their homes outright in 25 years. Then, secret color-coded maps of the nation's cities discovered by historian Kenneth Jackson in the 1970s guided HOLC's lending decisions. It guided their lending decisions. It guided their lending decisions. One of these days, I'm gonna get these buttons right. But it's guiding their lending decisions. So they made these maps. And they stated that red indicated hazardous neighborhoods, those treacherous, low down, property stinking, crime ridden, pea and rat infested neighborhoods. They're hazardous. Where lending was discouraged, telling banks, I wouldn't probably lend those people over their money. No. And this is by the HOLC, okay? No, I don't believe it's good business for you to lend in these areas. And this is these maps of all the major cities in America. And they gave this to the banks. And then he said, the best places are yellow and blue in between. While green indicated the best, yellow and blue were in between. So, of course, green were white. Yellow was probably middle-class white and Asians. And then blue were probably low-income Asians, some whites, and, of course, some Hispanics. Okay? But it states neighborhoods that were home to a high proportion of people of color. But this is the part I left out from highlighting. It states this, or Eastern or Southern European immigrants were always shaded red. That was interesting. And the reason why I asked you this, the reason why I mentioned this is because how could they tell? Unless someone told them they're from a particular European country. Now, don't get me wrong, Europeans can decipher people from different countries when they have those really major physical attributes of people from that country. That, you know, if someone has a certain hair color, like they have red hair color, and they speak with an Irish, accent, people know, okay, he's Irish. But there's other people who don't have all those, physical traits to let someone know what essentially European country they come from without talking or language or asking them outright. So that was kind of deceptive in my opinion, but that's my bias. It states, regardless of the quality of the homes or the local economy, think about that. Think about that. Neighborhoods that were high proportions of people of color, it stated, regardless of the quality of the homes or the local economy, the FHA explicitly focused on the racial composition of neighborhoods to estimate home values. So if you Black, automatically, your house ain't worth nothing. There was a decrease in the amount by, we're talking about 30 to 60%. So your home at that time, let's say, was worth $200,000. They took off 60%. They're saying your home is now worth $400,000. I mean, 140. My math is all off. But you get what I'm getting at. So this is what they were doing that was very, very strategic and targeted. And this was something that Black people didn't have preview of, because it was done by the organizations that was supposed to protect people, not target people. We're talking about the HOLC and the FHA. It says, according to Jackson, the HOLC and the FHA, the Fair Housing Association, so much for being fair, racist, devised a rating system that undervalued neighborhoods that were dense, mixed, or aging, and applied notion of ethnic and racial worth to real estate appraising on an unprecedented scale. We still have appraising disparities, appraising discrimination in America today. That's why Black folk who live in good neighborhoods, some of them have to take down their pictures and any identifying art or pictures or artifacts so their homes are not depraised because they're Black. But again, a lot of times when people speak about these things, oh, you're race baiting and you're making everything the color of Black and you're leading this and you're bleeding into it. No. I'm not saying this. This is what the information that was touted by the federal government that was backed up by independent resources that you guys can research for yourself. This is what they're saying. It says lending and land policies deny people access to government-backed loans and to the wealth-generating power of home ownership. That's what it states. It stated the racist policies that emerged from the Great Depression, 1929, were not adequately addressed by the federal remedies of the later 20th century, including the desegregations of schools, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Community Reinvestment Act, and dozens of president-set courting decisions and presidential executive orders. And the reason for that, none of those presidential executive orders were specifically for Black people. If you watch my video from yesterday, when I was getting into the weed of things, family, what I was speaking about is things being labeled, not just by the title, but within the context to be specifically for Black Americans. Because I then also pointed out legislation that was specifically for Asian Americans, specifically for Hispanics, specifically for Jewish Americans, and also as well as Native Americans, specifically for those groups. But when it came to Black Americans, you get people of color, underserved communities, communities of color, minorities, low-income areas. They never say for Black Americans throughout the whole entire legislation, bill, executive order. This is where we fall short. Just because you see Black in the title don't mean a damn thing. It's within the context of these legislations and bills when they stay on point of the word Black Americans as well. If you read any other bill that targets these other communities, you will see exactly that. It states that governments enacted an anti-discrimination laws that carried out the practice known as urban renewal, which actively accelerated the decline of non-white communities, made ready for redevelopment through decades of the investment using eminent domain. Local governments snatched up the homes and businesses of Black and immigrant communities at rock bottom prices. So the federal government had to get into the mix as well. Urban renewal. The governments, even as governments enacted anti-discrimination laws, they carried out practices known as urban renewal, which actively accelerated the decline of non-white communities that made ready for redevelopment through decades of de-investments in those Black communities, in those Black infrastructures. The reason why they still have lead in their water today, as I stated yesterday. These things are very strategic. So I can understand a common person who have been doing quite well for themselves is not really looking at the aspects of race because they see things very evenly. I get it. I understand. But growing up the way I did and then understanding some of the barriers and hardships that my mother and I went through before her death, you can't tell me that the truth is not real. You understand that? That the truth is not real. It says that it used eminent domain. Local government snatched up the homes and businesses of Black people at rock bottom prices, replacing them with commercial development or homes for who? Wealthier white families. Displaced residents were left to seek shelter in segregated markets or in poorly managed public housing units. What they're saying is we had different classes of Black people just as well they had different classes of white people. So these Black people who were doing well, they had their own businesses. When they enacted this redlining, they had to move into poor neighborhoods. Okay, because just like everybody has a class system within their own communities around the world, so did we. People who can afford nicer houses did so, right? And the Black communities were a lot larger. Think about that. The Black communities were a lot larger. So what did they do? They did the urban renewal because they wanted to build more businesses, more roads, so they can become wealthier. To stack Black people on each other. But anyway, displaced residents were left to seek shelter in segregated markets or in poorly managed public housings. It says decades later, social scientists, beginning with the Oscar Lewis, blamed them for deteriorating life outcomes based on the theoretical culture of poverty that they absorbed and transmitted across generations. So this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. And even to this day, if you guys go over to African-American housing, blackdemographics.com, and this is not just a bunch of Black people who got together and said, we're going to write a bunch of statistics. No, their sources are actually from the Census Bureau and other governmental related websites where they kind of put it in all one Black place and made a website out of it, okay? Just like this information here, this is coming from the U.S. Census Bureau 2017, okay? So you guys can reference this as well. Housing, occupied housing units, Black, 14 million, the rest of the country, 120, right? Owner-occupied housing units, 41% compared to the rest of the country at roughly 64%. Now we get into renting, right? Because they decreased Black home ownership by taking their land. And when they took their land, they replaced it with a commercial industrial building or something, decreasing the amount of land that they gave Black people to actually live in. Redlining, let's put all of these group of people in this area, right? Because at first they said, well, Black people are here, here, and here, and here. Look at the thumbnail. We had these little pockets. They said, well, how can we gather them in one area? Let's redline. What's that? And they just created out of their ass. But they knew they wanted to target Black people, not one, to only target their property value and to squish them into one area called the ghetto, okay? And they really started that in the 30s and 40s. Because where did America get the concept of ghettos? They got it from Hitler. They got it from Hitler during the Holocaust. So they used that methodology and strategy within redlining. Thus, to this day, Black Americans rent or occupied housing units at 58%, almost 59% of Black Americans live in rental property, whether it be a home or apartment, but you're still renting, you're not owning, you're not building generational wealth. That's what's important here. Okay? That is what is important here. Because gentrification is just another term for redlining. It's just another term for redlining. That's all it is. Because if we fast forward to today and we see the echoes that people may describe of discriminatory lending practices, predatory lending, with its high interest rates and unfair terms that disproportionately targets Black Americans. Now, we can go over a bunch of studies, but I can tell you they reveal that Black people face higher denial rates than anyone else, paving the way for financial hardships such as foreclosures and bankruptcies. And this is a very vicious perpetual cycle of economic inequality within the Black community. Because what happens? We're denied access to capital, That's another hurdle we have to go over. And some people may not even believe, well, what's your credit score? Well, I already told you when they even started redlining, and even to this day, Black people will have the same credit score, the same debt to income ratio, as well as the same assets, and still get denied lending in one particular area. But when they noticed that when Black people were migrating and they were getting these loans, same house, same square footage, same amenities, they were getting approved in non-white areas for the same sort of house. Because even when we secured loans, guess what they did? They offer higher interest rates. Again, they often face higher interest rate compared to white people with identical credit worthiness. So, of course, paying higher prices, which were burdens and challenging for Black people who wanted to own their own homes. And so some people want to understand the large racial wealth divide and how it persists today. One of the major factors is home ownership, because it simply exacerbated the racial wealth gap that we're still being affected by today. That's what we're missing here. So these things that have been occurring to Black people, with this one particular one, we won't even talk about the Homestead Act. But we have to look at that. We haven't had the same experience as everyone else in this country. We have a very vast and different past. And even through that, the laws and legislations and bills and executive orders that was put on the books for our benefit, for our well-being, things that are included to the Constitution. As I stated yesterday, the American government had to double and triple down for other groups of people in order for them to get the right that was already under the Constitution. But when we ask for those same things, then they quadruple down and say minority. Instead, when they gave other groups of people these same legislations, they actually said what they were. Okay? So let's get into it, family. Here we go. Gentrification may increase property values, and it also raises rents and property taxes, pricing long-term residents out of their own neighborhoods, often leading to more white and fewer Black residents. This means less wealth in the hands of Black Americans who already own just 10% of the wealth of white Americans on average. 10% of white people's wealth. That's all we got. 10% on the dollar. Consequences of gentrification in urban Atlanta firsthand. And they're talking about someone who did a documentary here, The Atlanta Way. It comes down and states that public housing in his city was destroyed at the behest of Atlanta Housing, the local housing authority, which was trying to remove concentrated poverty in the city. Effort really just opened up the most viable areas of the city for development and push poor people to relocate in other poor pockets of the city. Now, tell me, didn't I just state that in redlining? Didn't we just read that in redlining? We just read that, did we not? Because that's what gentrification is. And everybody's been saying this, but again, some people may not understand the dynamic of it. It says most of the people were able to get a Section 8 voucher moved to other lower economic pockets of the city, and the majority of people did not get these vouchers. And no data has emerged as to where they went. Nobody knows where these people went. Like, wait a minute, all these people moved, where'd they go? False economic growth and opportunities in low-income areas, meaning Black, and tear up existing zoning laws. It will take some serious changes of zoning laws, ordinances, and existing housing laws, building more immediately affordable housing units. This is kind of one of the strategies that they were talking about, is kind of breaking up these zoning laws because they have different zones of where people can do homes or residential, but they've broken it up and itemized it to a point where it was just people can live in these areas. And I say, well, no, houses can only be built in these areas, where apartments can only be built in these areas, where duplexes can only be built in these areas, and only trailers can be built in these areas, or trailers in apartments, or trailers in housing rentals, etc. They broke it up like that. I tell you, it goes deep. This is layer deep of what they're talking about. Many families displaced from multiple family dwellings in urban areas cannot afford to move to single family communities. So by breaking up these zoning laws, it creates opportunities to build more affordable housing. Okay. This is good. This is a good thing. It says Governor Kate Brown signed a law requiring Oregon cities with more than 1,000 residents to allow duplexes in areas that were previously zoned exclusively for single family homes. Now, this really won't help Black people in Oregon because there's not that many Black people in Oregon. I move on. Minneapolis law allows duplexes and triplexes to be built anywhere in the city. Okay. Okay, good. That's a good thing. That should decrease some of the housing costs. Wink, wink. Gentrification of Oakland, California, where over a period of 10 years, Oakland lost 25% of its Black population, Dedman said. That the loss was fueled in part by generations of economic apartheid, a term used to describe a system designed to keep Black people from equal access to things like housing and jobs. It goes on to state, Oakland's proximity to San Francisco, it became home to growing tech companies looking for tax breaks and tech employees looking for a cheaper place to live. From 2011 to 2016, the median home price in Oakland increased 178%. The demand for property in Oakland drove up home values, but it also drove out many Black residents because they couldn't afford their property no more. Because what happens is you have these high income earners that come into your area. And because they built a manufacturing, a tech, a building, and so all these Black neighborhoods were surrounding these tech hubs. So all these software engineers, data scientists, they're making $200, $300, $400 a year. They don't want to keep driving 2 or 3 hours to work. So when a home came open, they was giving people $30,000 to $40,000, $50,000 more than what the house is worth, thus driving up housing practice. The same thing is occurring in Texas. The same thing is occurring all around the U.S. A lot of these corporations are moving in downtown major hub cities like Atlanta, Baltimore, Minneapolis. DC is a city with itself. Detroit, you name it. So when all these tech savvy people come out for these software engineer jobs, they don't want to drive 2 and 3 hours to work. So they find a home in one of the local area numbers. And if a vast majority of them do that, guess what happens to property tax? Property tax automatically increases. Then those Black people who never wanted to move can no longer afford the property tax. They then have to sell their home and go live in a poor community. You see how that works? It says that the median home price in Oakland increased 178% when all these tech employees looking for a cheaper place to live moved in. That's what they're saying, not me. That's what I'm saying. But maybe you guys don't believe that this is still happening today. Oh, that's the past. Yeah, slavery, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, redlining, the burn of your town. Yeah, but yeah, that was 30, that was 100. Now we're talking about 40 years ago when it comes to the 70s. But it's still happening today. Maybe you don't believe. 3 years ago, here we go.
Welcome Andre Perry. He's the author of a book called Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. Andre is a fellow at the Brookings Institute. Andre, welcome. Good to have you with us. Maybe I'm the only person in the country who did not know this. I did not know, and I am surprised that lenders are allowed to ask your race as part of the application process. Why are they allowed to?
Well, one, we do need to have that information to know if we're actually lending to Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. So there is a data collection need, but unfortunately, we still see.
Okay, that's important what he said, that the reason why they're collecting this data is to ensure that they're lending to everyone. But also what the news anchor is kind of hinting at, isn't that also a way to discriminate against them? You see? So it's a way to discriminate against us while saying we want to make sure we're lending to Black folk. And Andre Perry is going to break it down. He's from the Brookings Institute, a very reputable institute, just like the Lincoln Institute as well. Other major sources to collect data like Pew Research. So all of these are very solid sources that we're listening to here. But it's very important to understand the contrast of what they're talking about, because one is saying, well, why are you putting a race on there if you know that discrimination has happened? And one is saying that, well, we have to do that to make sure we are lending to these people.
That data being used to punish Black buyers and sellers in many cases. And so, yeah, we want to see a sort of a colorblind approach, but we also know that if we don't collect the data, we won't have the information to remedy the situation.
But let me push a little bit here, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Why couldn't you collect that information after the mortgage application has either been approved or declined, so that it isn't known up front?
Now, some of you may laugh at me when I say this, family, but I'm actually being very serious when I say this, but some of you may even laugh. Even if they didn't put the race on it before, before they turned in the application or during the process of the application, they can still discriminate against us with our names. Right? Because we wanted to create our own names outside from our slave owners' names. And I know we make jokes of it all the time, but even though a lot of these names have kind of turned Black over time, like Tyrone, Michael is interchangeable. There's a lot of Michaels, Johns, but these are all white names. But now we started getting into where they've been really creative with some of our female names, like, Lucretia, Tanisha, Keisha, like all of these different names that we use in the Black society. But they can essentially discriminate against you off your name. Because chances are, if someone comes in there like, I don't know, Lord Destiny, but as their legal name, they're like, okay, yeah, that's definitely a Black person. But you guys get what I'm talking about. There are some names that no white person want to walk around with, okay? Now, granted, back in the day, there were some white Leroys. There are probably still a couple around today, but for the most part,
And therefore can't get into, in any way, the decision-making process.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly possible, but you still want a lot of information because there's a lot of things that occur in the front end that you want to address. And because many people fall out of the process. And so, but I agree with you, we need a better process overall to eliminate the bias. But again, it's hard to eliminate bias, even in the cases of more AI or technological applications, bias in, bias out. So if you have programmers who share the same kind of biases as current lenders, you're going to see the same kind of dynamics. So in some respects, it doesn't matter if you're asking a question or not. There are so many ways to get a glimpse of a person's race in the application process that shows up.
Let me ask a question again, because I'm curious and I'm ignorant on this. Is the fact that Black applicants are rejected more than white applicants, is it solely because of bias, or is it also because of data? In other words, that the data that is input creates an output that says this individual either because of income, length of.
Now, this next part is very important for those people who want to operate simply on the data and not those exoteric things that we can't truly define with statistics. So listen to this.
Other indebtedness, length of time at a job, or their race, if they disclose it, is less likely to be able to pay the loan. Walk me through that so that I have a better understanding of whether it is bias or data or a little bit of both.
It's a little bit of both, and I'll give you just a brief history lesson. We all, well, a lot of us know that the Homeowners Loan Corporation, the federally backed Homeowners Loan Corporation in the 30s, Redline, Black.
I want you guys to pay attention to what he said. He said the federally backed Homeowners Loan Corporation. So when we speaking about reparations, family, this is what we're talking about. A lot of the things happen with redlining, which is one of the major factors of the conditions we're in. This one of them, okay? Not stating this is the sole source, but a very, very major factor, if not the pillar, one of the key pillars of why Black people are living low impoverished today. The key word he stated there was the federal backing of the Homeowners Loan Corporation, okay? I'm gonna let it play through.
A brief history lesson. We all, well, a lot of us know that the Homeowners Loan Corporation, the federally backed Homeowners Loan Corporation in the 30s, redlined Black neighborhoods and not allowing them to refinance loans and get low interest loans to develop communities to then pass on that wealth. And so many Black Americans simply do not have wealth. And when you do not have wealth, you take on more debt. So there is that issue. But we should have policies that address that very fact, that we know that policy violence leveled against Black, brown, and indigenous folks occurred. And we need new mortgage products to do that. But I also just want to be clear that there is racial discrimination in the market. We control for a lot of the buyer's qualifications. And just like the person in your segment, we see when Black people have everything required for a great loan and they still get worse interest rates, they still are denied. And that's this out because of plain racism.
Yeah. I want to continue this conversation, Andre. It's been great having you.
Yeah, so he broke it down very, very good. And coming from a reputable source like the Brookings Institute, you know, the brother has done the research and is in the field when we're coming to these things. So I thought this was just kind of fun to post here for you guys. When I looked this up on blackdemographics.com, and again, this information is coming from their source is the U.S. Census Bureau, okay? So they not just kind of kicking this out their butts here. But anyway, they were just showing how the income of Black Americans went from Truman to Trump. And if you go from Truman, you got Eisenhower next, JFK, we had an incline, and then we had a leveling off when Nixon, Watergate scandal. Yeah, we probably, you know, Black people, we probably caused the Watergate scandal because that's what they say, you know, the reason why America's in the condition is because of Black people, okay? And even Black people say that to a certain extent. But Nixon, affirmative action, then it leveled off and decreased. This is the income that we're talking about. With Carter, Democrat, okay? With Carter, Democrat, decline. With Reagan, it actually increased and had a spike right there in 1988. Then when Bush came into office, it was a slight decrease leveling off from Reagan. And then the income of Black Americans went up as Bush was leaving office. And then of Clinton, it went up. When George W. got into office, it leveled off, so to speak. And then Obama came in, it dipped, and then it kind of rose on the end. And then Trump pretty much sustained it, okay? It's still going up. You don't see it going down, but it came back down to where Trump came in office. So we can't blame the orange man for that, right? We can't blame the orange man for that. It's not bad. So let's look at the income until 2016. And we're kind of getting to some current numbers here. I'm just want to show you guys this information that they put. Again, this is from the U.S. Census Bureau. Let me see, I go to the recent one of 2016. 21% of Black Americans, you know, are under the poverty line by $15,000. They make under $15,000 a year. The next segment is 25%. They're the working poor. That means living paycheck to paycheck, and the working class. Okay. Making anywhere from 15 to 35K. And this is where we're talking about the majority of Black Americans actually in the middle class. $35,000 to $100,000. And this is 2016. And then they're stating only 10% of us are making $100,000 or more. 2016. We're gonna move from there. We're gonna move from there. Now, this is more recent. This is 2 years ago, so this is probably most recent numbers. When it comes to a conglomerate group, there's still a huge disparity between the wealth gap between Black and white Americans, okay? We always use white Americans, but it don't really matter. Black and Asian Americans, Black and Hispanic Americans, okay? Because everything's not black and white. Oh, that's what they tell me. And this is coming from the Economic Policy Institute. It stated the median income for Black household was around 52. And this is why I kind of always tell you guys that the middle class of Black folk, their salaries are usually anywhere from 45 to 55,000, okay? Because you'll keep seeing different numbers out there. And now this is from Pew Research. They're stating that the median household income from Black U.S. household is $46,000, but at the top it stated $48,000, and you got 52. That's why I always stay within the realm of 45 to 55,000. Okay. Now here's a word from our sponsors.
You have said that you resent the idea.
I'm just kidding. I have no sponsor.
African American. That
Yes.
you are a Black American.
Yes.
Explain.
I think that when they call Black people who were born and raised for generations in this country, if you accept the handle of African American, that says that you don't accept being an American American. You don't accept being born in Chicago or New York or Detroit or wherever you were born. For generations, your family has been here, you know, built this country too. Sweat and tears and all that, you know, fought in every war, okay? So this is my country here. So I don't want to be called African American. I'm an American American. My people have died and done everything for this country.
You have
Watch out now. Good old Smokey got up on them. So it says here, what is predatory mortgage lending? Engaging in deception or fraud, manipulating the borrower through aggressive sale tactics or taking unfair advantages of borrower's lack of understanding about loan terms. And we understand that this occurred. So we went from the 1970s. Now we're moving to those predatory mortgage lending that occurred between 07 and 09. What happened in 07 and 09? The recession. The recession happened in 07 and 09. So when we get into the information of things, we understand that predatory lending. This is from the Office of the Attorney General of DC, by the way. It says, false or misleading promises, be wary of claims that sound too good to be true. And these are from banks. This is what they tell you. This is what the federal government is telling you guys in accordance with banks. When people say such things as easy credit, we say yes to everybody, no out-of-pocket expense, easy payment terms, no payment for 60, 90, 100 days or more. And you would think there would be like task force that will go out here and lock these people up who are saying these things because the federal government is basically saying, don't fall for the trick bag, don't fall for being frauded from these organizations that we allow to do these things. It's not illegal to do them, okay? What else? Let me see here. Be wary of any lender who tries to get you to refinance repeatedly. That happens to all of us. And some of you will say, well, no one comes in and try to make me, but they send you emails, they send you texts, they send you mail. Sometimes they'll even give you a call and try to convince you, like, this is probably a good time to refinance. You're like, well, I refinanced last year. Oh, but we have much greater rates. And you know what? You can take equity out of your home and do all of these things. And people, again, who are not knowledgeable of these things, who are not knowledgeable of equity, some of you are like, well, they should learn, they should know that. No, let's just be real, family. These things have to be taught. Some of us have the education and mindset to go out and learn these things. And guess what? Some people don't even really think about it. Like, I got enough money to buy a house, I'm gonna go buy a house. And they have to learn these things, unfortunately, through speed bumps along the way, or somebody informs them. But think about it. Why would they tell you be weary of a lender who tries to get you to refinance repeatedly? Because every time you refinance, one, it's a new loan. People don't understand when you refinance, that's a new loan. You have the ability to take out equity if there is equity, or keep it in and let it, compound and actually build. But when you refinance, your equity decreases. Thus, the property value decreases. You see that? And so when you go and sell your home, you have to sell it for a much lower amount. And if people keep doing that, they will have to move out of their homes because other people, like it's happening to a lot of states, whether it be Arizona, Texas, Florida, where everyone is flocking from California and moving to these other states that it's cheaper to live. They're essentially offering people $40,000 to $50,000 more, which raises everything in that area. Okay. It says steering and targeting. Even when you can qualify for a mainstream loan, predatory lenders may steer you into a subprime mortgage. This can include aggressive sales tactics and sometimes outright fraud. Fannie Mae has estimated that up to half of the borrowers with subprime mortgages could qualify for loans with better terms. This is how the government is doubling down and telling Black folk that during redlining and now gentrification, especially during the recession of 2007 to 2009, where all of these things started to come out about steered and targeting and predatory lending. They figured out a new way to burn our cities and towns. They found a new way to sink our cities underwater, but they did it in a less barbaric way. Instead of sending the KKK and white supremacist groups through your towns, no. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna take a strategy out of one of our old books, redlining. That we can't do redlining. We're gonna have to do something else. Well, we'll raise property taxes in the houses and encourage them to keep refinancing, thus lower the property value, and have people to come in and scoop up them houses and push them all out. What about the people who rent in these, Black communities, duplexes and things of that nature? We're just not going to fix them up. We're not going to improve the infrastructure. They're going to disperse. Okay. We're going to come in, or we're going to encourage those, what they call those landlords, those scum lords. We're going to encourage those scum lords to sell their property. We're going to tear down these apartment buildings, these duplexes, these triplexes, and we're going to start building single family homes and or townhomes or mini malls or a mall or amusement park. This is what we're going to do. We're going to push all these people out. We don't have to flood their towns no more. No, we're much more sophisticated now. We're a gentleman of this. We don't want to kill them all off. We need some people to blame all our problems on. That's what we need, because redlining is still a thing. Okay? It says the Department of Housing and Urban Development settled with the largest bank headquartered in Wisconsin over claims that it discriminated from 2008 to 2010 against Black borrowers in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota. The Bank Associated Bank denies wrongdoing in settlement, but HUD itself is declaring victory in one of the largest redlining complaints ever brought by the federal government against a mortgage lender. Now the federal government is fighting against the same people they empower to do this. I tell you, the hand of white supremacy, listen, it's a lose-lose situation. And this is the north side of Chicago over here, north side, and this is south side, okay? HUD's analysis of Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data concluded that the bank disproportionately denied qualified loan applicants in predominantly minority neighborhoods in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis, compared to the other lenders operating in these same communities. It must finance nearly 200, this is the now Associated Bank, has to finance nearly 200 million in home loans in majority minority census tracts within these cities, and pay nearly 10 million in down payment assistance to borrowers or low interest rates. It must also open 4 new offices in minority Black neighborhoods and Milwaukee and invest 1.4 million in marketing loans, okay? It also states here, if your family was denied a mortgage, you know what? I like this piece right here. This is a really good piece that Emily Badger did at this last paragraph, because she kind of took it home here. Okay, shout out goes to her. I don't know who she is, but this last paragraph was very, very powerful for people who don't understand how home ownership, how important it is, and how it has been a major pillar of the poverty rate of Black Americans. She stated here, if your family was denied a mortgage in the 30s, the 50s, or even the 70s, then you may not have the family wealth or down payment help to become a homeowner today. In that way, the consequences of past redlining transcend time. Again, the consequences of past redlining transcend time, even as new forms of it continue. That's a mic drop. That's a mic drop. Because that's what now people understand. Because if I've had my home, let's say 25 years, I'm 60 years old, I own my own home, and my son, he is going off to college, but I don't have the money readily, but I can also go ahead and pay another $300, $400, $500 a month. Even though I don't have a house, I paid off my home. I take the equity out of my home and pay for my son's college tuition. Or my daughter or son is looking for a house. They don't have the initial down payment. I take out a little bit equity of my home because I own my own home, or I'm close to buying it all, but I have tons of equity in it and I can help them out. You see, that's how this whole redlining transcend time, because we could have been buying homes, building wealth, and gaining land, but redlining prevented all of that. But they have not prevented other groups. But supposedly there are some organizations out there that can help, right? What programs are available to help Black Americans become homeowners? Now, again, since we don't have reparations, and I know how people are with reparations, but this is their form of helping Black people. Now, again, I told you, substance, family, substance. It says African Americans in the title, but as we get down to the Chase Home Buying Grant, it states that part of the $30 billion JP Morgan Chase pledge to close the racial wealth gap, when it debuted, it offered a $25,000 grant and mortgage rate of the 3.25% through a Fannie Mae loan with the goal of funding $40,000 mortgage to Black and Latinos. And Latinos, not Afro Latinos, but Latinos. I thought this was for Black Americans and Latinos. Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Every piece of legislation, family, every piece has to have another group involved with it. But if I go to some of their legislation that this government has wrote for them, you don't see Ann Black. No, the hell you do not. Wells Fargo. Buyers must complete a HUD home education program. These homes must be designated in neighborhood lift communities. What are neighborhood lift communities? Majority Black. The program requires customers to complete 8 hours of home buyer education. So not only you have to designate a community that's part of this whole called neighborhood lift, but you also have to take 8 hours of education, which on the low key, I kind of applaud that. People should know this information. I digress. Bank of America. Oh man, this is great. I just guys want you to read this piece of shit. I mean, this piece they have here. But the point I'm making here, family, they have all of these banks saying how they're going to help Black Americans in the title. But if you notice, if you read any of these things here, it's for everybody. Everybody can do this. Low-income whites, low-income Asian, low-income Hispanics, low-income immigrants, low-income illegal immigrants could probably do it. Because I shouldn't even say illegal immigrants anymore, family. I should really just say legal crossing citizens. LCCs, I don't know, legal crossing citizens. That's what they are. I just made that up. Then you have the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, 2 million new Black homeowner program. Okay. Offers advocacy for Black homeownership and assistance with access to credit and neighborhood and community development projects to foster ownership among their initiatives. Then you have the 3BY30 initiative. Okay, talking about the Black homeowner rate. All right, they got their sources below. So when we're talking about redlining, gentrification, understanding the Black poverty class that we have in relation to income, because we really got on income, the reason why, Black Americans are not making as much as their non-Black counterparts in the same industries, with the same experience, with the same skill sets. That's another long video. But you guys have a great day. Be one.